Over many centuries, the forces of climate and atmosphere relentlessly chipped away at the rocky peaks, reducing their once formidable stature. Fragment by fragment, the mountainsides eroded, bearing witness to the power of a force capable of conquering even the strongest of natural defences. Along the valley floor, enormous boulders lay where nature had felled them from the great heights above, unseen hands directing their descent. Few creatures dared to dwell amid this harsh terrain. On high, a pair of golden eagles spiraled with abandon, revelling in the strength of their wings. On the ground, rabbits darted amongst the rocks, while carrion crows flitted about with harsh cries, eagerly awaiting the spoils of their next meal. Since the arrival of the Normans, a bountiful feast had been theirs, and they knew that more would be forthcoming. The Normans arrived, spurred on by the tantalizing sight of their prey. They had little need to track their quarry carefully, for Bjarni was only a short distance ahead. Though the ascent was steep and the terrain treacherous, Bjarni proved to be the stronger climber, maintaining his lead with ease. As they ascended, the hills grew steeper and more rugged, each turn offering new challenges. At times the Viking chief disappeared from view, his voice carrying down from some hidden crag, mocking his pursuers. Despite every obstacle, the Normans drew closer to their goal, inching toward the summit of the water-carved gorge. Along the ridge, sheer and forbidding cliffs loomed in an unbroken line, bare and barren. Climbing them would be a monumental task, requiring a grueling, circuitous approach if they were to be outflanked. The waters, for countless eons, with ceaseless rush and flow, had sundered the flinty limestone rocks in a single steep crevice from top to bottom. To pursue the mad Saxon, as Bjarni was dubbed by the Normans, through this eerie chasm, was to venture into no more than a fissure between steep, overhanging rocks on both sides, and so full of twists that the path would frequently vanish a couple of yards ahead. Yet the Saxon knew his terrain. The Normans, however, did not. Nevertheless, in their minds, the Saxon was a fleeing adversary, and they were many, hence valorous. Disregarding all of the lessons in personal bravery and reckless daring that this man had taught them beforehand, they recklessly pursued after him, with hounds frothing at the mouth and tugging at their leashes. It was a dreadful gap to enter, and they had covered but a short distance when a jutting crag loomed, forcing the waters to veer in order to flow around it. With a deep bark and an enthusiastic leap into the turbid, whirling waters, as he discerned blood, the foremost hound tore past the crag. Dragging the Norman who followed him, the canine eagerly plunged forward. But a strike from Bjarni's sword sliced the hound in two, and a second strike shattered the Norman who was holding him. With a despairing, terror-filled cry and no attempt to defend themselves, they scrambled back in hasty retreat, each caring only for their own safety, and abandoning the last man to the mercy of the savage giant who was in pursuit. But when they arrived in the open plain, where they could swarm their opponent, there was no opponent to engage. Bjarni had exhausted his chance and had vanished. Who, now, would be the first to re-enter and force this savage man out of his hideaway? Sadly, nobody. However, there was no time to squander, and the Normans were consumed by enraged impotence. Therefore some of them scurried around the end of the crags, while others scaled the cliff face, each and all striving to arrive atop the rocks with the utmost haste. The strategy was executed in the end, and swarms of people cautiously approached the rift to peer down into the watercourse, hoping intensely, but also almost afraid to catch a glimpse of their enemy. However, no Saxon was to be found. They scurried along the sides of the crevice, peering down as they went, confirming that their quarry was indeed caught in his lair. But there was no trace of him. They continued on, overlapping each other in turns, until they reached the top of the hill, where the watercourse had completely run out into a deep, spongy bog. Hastily scrambling up the hill, they eagerly glanced down into the valley beyond. With wild expressions of rage, they saw the object of their utmost hatred and fear, making his way down the mountainside with long, swinging strides, nearly a mile ahead. He immediately disappeared into a dense forest that seemed to stretch out its sheltering arms to the fleeing man. Bjarni was then accompanied by his two comrades, and they continued onward for 2 or 3 miles through the woods. They eventually rounded the head of Lake Ullswater, patiently climbing the steep headland on the opposite side of the lake. Resting there for a while to regain their strength and eat, they were soon stirred to action by the sounds of people and hounds following them persistently. The Normans were furious and continued to track their arch-enemy with the remaining hound. Bjarni and his men steadily led the pursuit at a trot, covering another 5 or 6 miles along the lake shore without stopping. "Shall we keep running until they tire out, Jarl?" one of Bjarni's men asked him. "No. I have another purpose in mind. But this long race, with the taste of steel in the middle, will do them some good." "Are you planning on heading to the cave, Jarl? There are only a few men there, and we're no match for this company. Plus there are women and children to consider." "No, that's not an option for now. Is the boat still safely moored at the foot of Hawk's Cliff?" "It is clear to me now, Jarl," he said with certainty. "Your plan is quite cunning. To evade the Norman's noose so smoothly is a stroke of genius." They continued on their way until they arrived at Hawk's Cliff, their designated meeting place. The immense rocks towered over a lake with nearly vertical faces that jutted out over the water. The trio confidently made their way down a precarious path that required a steady hand, nimble feet, and knowledge of the dizzying route. At the bottom, they found their getaway vessel, a small boat tucked away among the trees at the water's edge. With their pursuers hot on their heels, the crew quickly embarked and paddled away from the shore, heading for the other side of the lake. This strategic move effectively baffled their adversaries. Whether they circled the lake or retraced their steps, the fugitives had gained precious miles. By day's end, the exhausted pursuers were forced to abandon their mission, having made yet another fruitless attempt to overcome the fiercely independent enemy. Despite every effort to rein him in, he stubbornly refused to be tamed, forever extracting a bloody toll and defying all attempts at peace. Chapter 40. The Hour Before the Dawn. With swift and steady strides, their powerful horses carried Ragnvald and Gormr through the forest on the night which would change their fate forever. Matters of great importance have called for their urgent attention, and there can be no allowance for delay. Soon they arrived at the mysterious passage in the woods where they stood together before parting ways. "Gormr, hold the horses and await my return. Our rest shall be more peaceful and serene, knowing that have we brought peace to others and unburdened our minds of the weighty matters following today's work," said Ragnvald, as he disappeared into the depths of the giant oak. Meanwhile, Elfrida Hofso, pacing around the battlements in the frigid night, struggled with her emotions. She hoped to hear the voice and see the form of her lover. As she lifted her tearful eyes to the heavens, the clouds above seemed to reject her pleas for comfort. But in time, she turned from the divine and focused her attention on the potential of human aid. She peered outward into the night, hoping for a sign of hope. However, the howling wind relentlessly battered her, and eventually she retreated to the sanctuary of the wall. "Will he come tonight?" Elfrida whispered towards the emptiness. Her heart gave a faint response, an answer to the soul-crushing uncertainty that beset her. "No, he is a fugitive and a hunted man, an outlaw and wolf's head. After today's retribution, he must hide himself as best he may. Yet I cherish him all the more for it. He is brave and honest, and I will gladly share poverty and banishment with him. What would I not surrender at this moment to know that he is secure, to feel the grasp of his iron-armed hand, to hear his voice resonating with heroic fortitude, but coupled with such tenderness that even a babe would be lulled to slumber as though it were a mother's lullaby. When he is near, peril seems to flee me, and the shadow of ominous fate is vanquished by winged hope. However, my aspiration is useless, for he does not come. Perhaps the foul, traitorous minions have already retribution in his shedding of blood, and I shall never again lay my eyes upon him. I must hurry to my quarters and weep and pray the night away, hoping that tomorrow could bring tidings of him. Just one final glimpse from the bastion before I retire." So she spoke and rose to her feet. Ah, a footfall on the stone staircase caught her attention. Someone spies her movements. She is discovered. Her heart beats frantically. She falls to the ground as the day's carnage distorts in her mind's eye. Ah, what is that? The towering form of the Saxon leader looms in the dim light. With a cry of uncontainable joy, she rushes across the gap between them and throws herself into his brawny arms in a blissful faint. "My darling, you are mine now," exclaimed Ragnvald, enfolded her into his chest and planted a kiss upon her chilled forehead. "You poor thing. What have you been doing, watching alone in this cold night air with so little on?" The ears he poured his affectionate words into were deaf, and the eyes he tried to gaze into were shut. "Poor child," he consoled. "This is too much." He held her in his embrace, his warm cheek pressed against hers. Her eyes slowly opened, taking in his face. Then they closed again, a sweet smile crossing her features as the emotions of despair and hope passed through her. It was like a child waking in agony from a terrible dream, only to find their mother nearby, offering comfort and peace. For a minute or two she lay still, basking in the joy that had infused her every being. At last she spoke. "I'm so glad you're here," she said. "I was so afraid for all of us, for you and my father. Please forgive my silence, but I was simply drinking in the joy of your arrival. This day has been so terrible for me, and I fear for what is to come. The abbot accused my father of disloyalty and planning the slaughter of his brother. His rage was dreadful to hear. He threatened to take the matter to the king. Do not fear, my love. The worst is past. Justice has been done this day, and I will not think about it again." "Is the Count asleep?" "No. He is still awake and pacing his room. He is desperate to find a way to stop the abbot's plans." "But the villain's plans have already been thwarted. The Avenger has met him face to face, and he is no more. Let us go to the Count. I have news that will make him grateful even to a Saxon outlaw. Come, I will tell the story once." Together they descended the winding staircase of the turret and made their way to Hofsos's quarters. Elfrida knocked softly on the sturdy oak door, but received no reply. Gently she pushed the door open and ushered in her companion. The Count was huddled over his oaken desk, his head in his hands, seemingly unaware of their entrance. "Father," Elfrida spoke softly. Startled, the Count raised his head and quickly stood up, taking in the sight before him. A strong Saxon warrior stood in his presence, and to his shock, his lovely daughter was warmly embracing him. "Elfrida," the Count breathed. "Father, please welcome this noble Saxon warrior. He deserves it. He has proven himself to be our most loyal and trusted ally. He carries with him news that we will all be glad to hear." Elfrida then introduced her Saxon lover to her father, and Ragnvald, dropping to one knee, spoke. "Respected sir, your daughter showed me mercy when she had every reason to let me perish. On the night of the castle siege, she freed me from my prison cell and removed my shackles with her own hands." "Elfrida, I had no idea," the Count said, stunned. "Father, please let Ragnvald share his story. You will understand why I showed him mercy." "Noble sir," Ragnvald addressed the Count, "Saxons never forget a debt of honor. I have done my best to repay the debt that your daughter bestowed upon me, but I must confess that my heart now belongs to her. I cannot and will not remove such a lovely and charming tenant. Please, Saxon, have a seat. I do not comprehend the language spoken by either of you, and I am not sure if it is appropriate to communicate with one who my king has deemed my enemy. However, regardless of your background, you have shown yourself to be a brave and noble knight today. Your disguise was impressive, and you arrived at the right time. I am still uncertain of your intentions." Ragnvald then proceeded to share his mission with the Count, and all three of them spoke well into the night, strategizing and forming alliances. They were no longer divided by their status or origins, but united in their shared vision for a better future. "It was designed to eliminate a deadly serpent from your grasp and from our race, by ridding us of a bloodthirsty tyrant. You may know more than it is customary for a stranger to know about my concerns. Nonetheless, I know not if I am indebted to you or not. One viper destroyed has given rise to others whose poison I dread even more, and whom I'm powerless to appease. Allow me to explain, Your Grace. I indeed became aware of your secret, but I owed your daughter everything. My life was returned from the clutches of death, and the love I felt for her, along with the just retribution that I and my people owed to the Valdis brothers, for the immeasurable suffering they inflicted upon us, compelled me to watch with utmost vigilance. I had to serve you and your kin, and free my people from a deadly terror. I have news to convey, your grace. Not only is Baron Valdis deceased, but his brother, the abbot, has fallen under the avenging hand of one of my fellow countrymen, and was buried in the silent woods. Furthermore, these are the fatal letters, Ragnvald said, drawing them from his bosom and passing them to the Count. I believe no living soul other than ourselves is aware of their contents, so it's simple to neutralize the malevolence they once possessed. As soon as the Count glimpsed the deadly letters, which had been hovering over him like the sword of Damocles for a long time, a radiant smile illuminated his face. After reading them over one by one, he exclaimed, "Thank God!" Rising from his seat, he went over to the towering fireplace, where the charred remains of a fire were glowing, and carefully dropped the letters into the embers, observing as the flame crept up the chimney, before gathering the faint residue of ash with intense care. Then he returned to the table and bestowed a pleased and genial look upon Ragnvald. "Correct me if I'm mistaken, Saxon. Was the abbot's passing part of your claims?"
"Yes, my lord. I understood well that our task was only half finished, and our mission only halfway complete while the abbot was still alive. I also knew that any delay would spell doom, so I and a handful of followers took the audacious step of forcing our way into the monastery. There we found the abbot in deep conversation with a man named Pierre, whom you may have encountered before." "Yes, Pierre. I know him well. A brave man, but also a notorious villain. I hope he had no part in this foolish endeavor of mine."
We caught the abbot in the process of revealing everything to him. Pierre was being bribed and provoked to travel to London at once and deliver incriminating letters to King William. His intention was to evoke the wrath of the king against you, and then seize your lands and possessions. And what of Pierre? Is he still at large and in possession of this information? No, my lord. The same stalwart fellow who served me as squire during the tournament had a personal grudge against Pierre and a long list of crimes to avenge on behalf of our people. He challenged Pierre, fought him single-handedly with honor, and slew him. So now Pierre is no more. Saxon, you have done well. While I was hesitating and uncertain about how to proceed, you have planned and executed this perfectly. You have my everlasting gratitude. But what of the matter between yourself and my daughter? I am bewildered. Elfrida, are you two in love? Yes, father, his daughter answered. This has evidently been going on for some time, right under my nose, and yet I was oblivious to it. It's quite strange, and I admit with shame that I was obtuse. But enough about me. Elfrida, come here. Elfrida stood up, wrapped her arms around her father's neck, and planted a tender kiss on his cheek. Please forgive us, father. We meant no harm, and we dared not reveal our feelings until the timing was right. But all along, we've been scheming and plotting how to free you from the grasp of your enemy.
I have nothing to forgive, truly, dear one. But was it wise to let your heart drift like a ship without a rudder on a stormy sea, and let the wayward winds take you where they wished? Nevertheless, a benevolent force has watched over you, and you have deserved it. Your love has been placed blindly by human standards, but it has been well placed in the hands of a courageous and trustworthy man, even if he is not of our kind. But where will this lead, and how will William react to the news that the daughter of Hofsos has a Saxon suitor? Elfrida reassured the Count. Father, let us have faith and patience. There is no need to fear disaster now. This valiant Saxon lover of mine can wait the pleasure of our liege lord. And my happiness is so complete that I cannot decide whether I would be happier as a lover or a wife. There is still much to be done, and I have no doubt that William will recognize the value of an ally and friend who is both wise and brave, even if he is a Saxon. Chapter 41. Nobility in Contrast. Behold the divine potential of woman, as Wordsworth wrote. Following the dramatic events that saw the removal of the Valdis brothers and their ally Pierre, relations between the outlawed Saxons and Normans in the domains of Hofsos became more congenial. The Saxon community in the mountains ventured down to the valley and resumed farming without any obstruction. The outlaws, formerly dependent on the forests for sustenance and spoils, returned to their peaceful occupations and plots of land. Racial interactions became more frequent,
with intermarriage being a usual occurrence. The proud, domineering demeanour of the Normans mellowed as the Saxon enmity dissipated. The vernacular language evolved into a blend of Saxon and Norman, as both communities learned each other's languages out of need, and I personally witnessed the merger of the two peoples. To Ragnvald, Elfrida, and myself, this amalgamation was a source of delight, making it clear that Norman rule was unassailable. While some stubborn Saxons instigated conflict and insurrection, and there were cruel, overbearing Normans, I could perceive that both races would eventually combine into a unified community for their mutual gain. It is gratifying to report that, with the intervention of Elfrida and the benevolence of Hofsos, I was reinstated as the head of the monastery, with most of my privileges and compensation intact. This allowed me to play a decisive role in reconciling these two groups. Amid a multitude of obligations, I am grateful to have found the energy and time to write these annals.
Dear reader, please forgive my digression as I indulge in a bit of egotism. Let me continue with the history at hand. Hofsos knew he could not ignore the obligations that Ragnvald had bestowed upon him, nor could he interfere with the love between the two. However, he began to question how his sovereign, William, would react to this union. If William disapproved of it, his word would be law. Hofsos wrestled with the decision of whether to secure William's consent before the marriage or to unite the couple and present them to the king. In the end, he chose the bolder option and scheduled the wedding. It was decided that the ceremony would exclude pomp and instead feature rustic games and rural sports that were beloved by the common folk. On the day of the nuptials, the bridal party made their way through the forest to the sanctuary we had adorned for the occasion. As they journeyed with carefree and happy hearts, there were others whose lives were forever altered by this event. Concealed amongst the foliage, one heard the joyous peals of the bells ring out as a death knell. Nearby, another waited like a wild beast, eager to pounce and exact his revenge on the Norman invader. As the party approached the abbey gates, Erika, disguised as a peasant woman, shadowed them. Before long, she noticed Bjarni trailing the bridal party, sword in hand, and eyes locked on his prey. With haste, she caught up to him and asked urgently, "What does this mean, my lord?"
"Good day, Erika," he said, dismissing the initial inquiry. "I am indeed present, my lord, and if I may say, in an opportune moment. But may I question the purpose of your unsheathed sword in a time of apparent peace?" With ferocity in his voice, the lord responded with, "Are you unaware of today's heinous plan, Eirika? Ragnvald is set to wed a Norman woman, solidifying his treachery. If I do not kill him before this day's end, then know that I am a coward." Alarmed, Eirika said, "I beg of you, madness fuels these words. Please put away your sword and heed my warning. If any harm comes to Ragnvald or his bride, if you dare to hurt them now or ever, then know that you shall make me your worst enemy. Your crime will not go unpunished. You are the one who is mad, Eirika. If you loved your own people, you would feel only hatred for this atrocity. If only I did not lay eyes on you this day, I would have removed this blemish on the Saxon name." This Saxon warrior was clearly smitten with Eirika, and her influence over him was undeniable. Without a single word, he sheathed his sword and disappeared into the forest. Eirika followed the wedding procession into the chapel, sitting among peasants and Saxon commoners who gathered in secrecy to witness the ceremony. Though there were some notable Normans in attendance, most of the Saxons present were stripped of their estates and deferred to their conquerors with bowed heads and frightened looks. To anyone observing carefully, it was clear that among the small group of Normans gathered, there was great disapproval of the upcoming ceremony. As the tall and muscular Saxon who had valiantly fought for his independence approached the altar, they could not forget the power that his name held over the Saxons. Countless times he had bravely stood up against the Norman tyrants and their cruel ways. To see him now, standing beside one of the most noble and beautiful women of their race, was bitter as gall. The Normans could be heard ominously muttering and handling their weapons, and I must admit, this was what I had feared. Others had predicted it as well. Just then, Gormr and a group of armed Saxons entered the chapel and took their place near the bridal party. This only increased the anger of the Normans, but they were nevertheless overawed and did not make any further displays of disapproval. Before the marriage ceremony could be completed, as the monks chanted the Benedicite, Erica quietly slipped away from the chapel and made her way towards the heart of the forest. She took an unfrequented path that led to Bjarni, who had been waiting for her nearby. "Has the Saxon traitor dishonoured himself by marrying into the family of the Norman oppressors?" Bjarni asked. "Ragnvald has wedded the fair Norman, and I give them my blessing. It is a sign of peace for our downtrodden race, and an omen of the coming union of our people with the Normans," Erica replied. Bjarni was filled with hate towards the Saxons who had betrayed their country and surrendered to the Norman invaders. They played a part in holding their people in bondage for generations to come. "This is most unpleasant to me, my lord. I will hear no more of it. You can't seem to fathom their motives or see reason. So please, I beg of you to stop this unreasoning hatred," Erica pleaded. "Where are you going now, Erica? May I accompany you?" Bjarni inquired humbly. "I am headed to the monastery of Crowland, my lord." "The monastery of Crowland. Such words should not be spoken, my dear. What is it that you mean? To go there, Erica. Surely you shall not make such a journey. Promise me that you will not venture to Crowland, Erica." His voice filled with anguish. "I understand your concern, my lord," replied Erica resolutely. "It cannot be so, Erica. You cannot leave us this way. We are ruined if you leave us. Promise me that you will not go to Crowland, anywhere else you may choose." I had thought that by now I could rid myself of my crude habits and make you my wife. Ragnvald is wed, and you cannot be his bride. What is stopping you from being mine? I am willing to fulfill any demands, Erica. I beg of you, do not leave me like this," he pleaded pathetically. "Alas, my lord, that will never change. My love is dead and will never blossom again. My heart has no capacity for new affections. A woman's heart can only be won once. Do not implore me further, my lord. The end has come, a new era has emerged, and you and I have no place in this world. It is best we fade away." She spoke calmly but firmly. "Is there no hope, Erica? Can you never be my wife? Perhaps you will change some day. I can wait for 20 years if you ask me," he implored hopefully. "There is no hope, my lord. There can only be one more change for me, and that is when I adorn the funeral garb," she said. "No hope, Erica. Is this the end?" He spoke each word as if it were a sharp dagger to his heart. "Then I am doomed." He slowly stood up, puffed out his chest, and stretched his muscular arms as if about to fight an enemy. "Very well, then," he spoke. "I will exact bitter revenge on our Norman enemies. I will spill my blood for the land I cherish and earn a warrior's honor. Then Valhalla awaits me. Odin, Norse god. I am on my way to join the spirits of heroes awaiting me beyond the dark and murky sea." His head hung low and his hands covered his face as he shook with emotion. It was the cry of a desperate faith, but it came from the depths of his soul and pulled him towards the loving embrace of infinite mercy. Erica trembled with sympathy for the noble Viking's bitter despair, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Farewell, my lord," she said softly, her voice breaking. "May God have mercy on you. No, Erica, I'll go with you. I want to see you safely through the door if it must be. It's not safe for you to travel alone with these Norman dogs prowling everywhere. They have no respect for someone like you. I regret to say that I cannot allow it, my lord. It would be too dangerous for both of us. Do you not know the price on your head that the Normans have set? They've made me an outlaw, that I know, but they will not be done with me yet. Even though I am broken in spirit, I fear them not. I care not for the price on my head, for I have nothing left to live for but to die as a true Viking. If it is a danger for you to travel with me, then so be it. It is a bitter parting, Erica. Do not fear for me, my lord. Abbot Adhelm has arranged for 2 monks to accompany me. Their sacred office and my vows will protect us from the Normans' violence. Will I never see you again, Erica? Will you not return to these hills, so that we may meet again and see how the world fares for you and me? Promise me that you will return sometimes, and let me look upon your fair face. You are all that I have left to live for." Erica was deeply moved by Bjarni's fervor, but she simply said, "My lord, I cannot hope to encounter you again on this earthly plane. However, I will dare to hope and pray that when our God, infinite in mercy and compassion, shall evaluate the balance between right and wrong, between high ideals and grovelling ambition. In other words, when he shall judge the world in righteousness, he will discover that the recording angel has made many entries to your account, and blurred out many faults with his tears. After all is said and done, it will be revealed that your fallible yet sturdy virtues outweigh your many faults and limitations in life. Then we shall meet again beyond the grave, where we shall see eye to eye, and where the wicked cease from troubling, and the weary are at rest. Farewell, my lord. Bjarni was silent as he watched her disappear, standing for several minutes gazing after her as one struck by immense loss. His massive frame shook with powerful emotions. Slowly he muttered to himself, "The sun has set upon all my hopes. My day is done, and all is lost except for the love of my country and the desire for revenge. I can't bend and crouch like this Ragnvald. Once a Viking, always a Viking." Then, turning around, he disappeared into the forest. Chapter 42. Vikings All, an old-time saga. In the words of John Milton, sonorous metal, blowing martial sounds, at which the universal host upsent a shout that tore hell's concave and beyond frighted the reign of chaos and old night. Not long after this, Bjarni and a group of wild Vikings sought out the cave of the priest Olaf, where they were met with a hearty but grim welcome. Olaf was delighted to see so many hardy-looking warriors before him, and he inspected their weapons and limbs with glee. He was transported back to his youth, spouting old sagas and folk talk of bygone generations. The Vikings themselves were a desperate and uncouth lot, having little regard for their own lives, unless it was accompanied by some wild triumph over their enemies. They cared nothing for death, as it meant entrance into Valhalla, the Vikings' idea of heaven. Bjarni asked Olaf if he had any advice for them, as they were being pursued by foreign dogs and were sorely pressed. Olaf promised to speak with Skuld, the ruler of all manslaying, on their behalf. If Skuld rode with them to battle, the Normans would be no match for their strength. They would also invoke the ancient god Odin and his maidens of victory, the Valkyries, to guarantee success. With those words, the elder priest guided them into a vast cavern leading out from the massive cleft. On their right, a low wood fire burned, casting flickering shadows over a line of rock ledges used for seating. Olaf gestured for his guests to take a seat and began lighting torches, which he then hung against the rocky walls of the cave. The shifting and erratic light gave the cavern an eerie appearance, as if the white, jagged surfaces of limestone rock were humanoid sentinels standing watch from the darkness. This was a significant time for Olaf, a holy man whose sacred occupation had fallen out of fashion and into obscurity to his great dismay. In these tumultuous times, with men struggling against their enemies, they came now to him, humbly seeking his aid in dire distress. As he wandered about the cave, his muttering, mumbling, and chanting never ceased. First, he scoured the cavern for food for his famished guests, then tended to the fire. Next, he retrieved the bleached bones of a renowned chieftain from a stone coffin in one of the recesses, draping them around his neck and body. From another recess, he procured a long pole carved with runes, referred to as the skaldstong, or imprecation pole. This he erected by inserting the base into an evidently prepared hole. It was used to admonish Odin's curses upon their foes and invoke the assistance of Valkyries, whom countless warriors had seen mounted on fiery steeds coming to their rescue. Throughout this entire process, Olaf's chillingly haunting song did not falter. It was a strange gibberish, at times rising into metric verse which he sang in an unrefined, sing-song voice. Other times it was frantic imprecations and interjections, thrown out in thrashing gestures and in tones that rang out loudly. As the procession continued, the effect it had on the wild men was electrifying. At first, they were merely muttering under their breath, but slowly, and then with more urgency, they began shouting, jumping to their feet and swinging their swords as if in battle. Even Bjarni, who had been initially uninterested, was soon overwhelmed by the frenzy, leaping around with his weapon brandished, as the entire cave echoed with their shouts and shrieks of excitement. Olaf's song, despite seeming like gibberish to modern ears, had a powerful hold over these rough and superstitious men. Its frenzied energy and fanatical intensity spoke directly to their irrational faculties, and they were soon swept up in its contagious spell. As the excitement reached a fever pitch, the priest's voice cut through the din, shouting with prophetic fervour, "The battle approaches! The blood of the Normans calls out to us! Gig, the woman of the Jotun race, has gone ahead to confound our foes. Rise up, Skalds, and scatter our enemies." With these words, he handed each man a small piece of wood, inscribed with powerful runes, and instructed them to carry it with them as protection from wounds and death. Then, picking up an image of Thor, he led the way out of the cave and up onto the limestone hills, with Bjarni and the rest following in their wake in a state of intense excitement. Despite the darkness overhead, broken only by broken and ominous-looking clouds scurrying by on the boisterous wind, they felt invigorated and empowered, ready to face whatever fate might have in store. The elements seemed to have caught a fierce infection, for the wind cried and whistled against the mammoth boulders and the barren limestone cliffs on the hillside. It breathed passion and roared through the forest below, swaying and hurling the treetops until they appeared to be possessed. The fierce group of men responded to this tempest of the elements with savage joy, every man amongst them believing that this fierce storm of nature was the result of the divine agents they had invoked, and already hastened to help them in their mission of vengeance. The old priest's strength and liveliness were astonishing. He seemed to have shed the aches of old age, the frenzied, fanatical spirit within obtaining an absolute authority over his fragile entity. He steered the pack at a fast pace, chanting as he went the same haunting tune. In due time, the downgrading pathway, which they had trailed, led them into the sight of the Norman campfires, at the vision of which they couldn't resist the urge to shout and menacingly wave their swords. Yet the position of the elements was such that hardly any audacities of that kind would reveal their presence. The Normans had positioned themselves in an exposed clearing, with the woods circling them and 20 yards inside their campfires. But former bitter experiences had taught them tremendous care. 2 or 3 guards strolled back and forth, and several savage dogs lay curled up in the light of the fire. In addition, every sleeper, as he lay wrapped in the arms of peaceful sleep, clutched his sword hilt. Presently one of the dogs lifted its head and listened. Then he rose to his feet with a savage growl. "What's up, Gripper?" said one of the watchmen, bowing and stroking him on the head. "It's merely the wailing of the wind amid the trees." The canine listened keenly with his eyes fixed on the forest, and gave a few impatient growls as though partly appeased, but not satisfied. "Just lie down, sir," said the watchman once more, patting him. The dog reluctantly obeyed, emitting a low growl as he stretched and placed his nose between his paws. His eyes shone menacingly in the darkness, and he scanned the area with a sense of unease. Before long, he sprang to his feet with a loud bay that echoed through the camp. With a fierce energy, he charged towards the thicket, only to hastily retreat at the sight of the priest Olaf. The old man carried the bones of a dead hero, and bore an image of Thor, striking fear into the hearts of the men in the camp. Suddenly the Vikings appeared with a ferocious war cry, sending the Normans into a state of terror and confusion. The Vikings fought like demons and struck their enemy with a terrifying force. The Normans, in their panic, believed that the devil himself helped the invaders. The Vikings, on the other hand, were convinced that supernatural forces bolstered their fighting skills, and they charged forward with unwavering determination. The Normans were on the brink of disaster, but one brave soul broke the spell. He charged towards Olaf, shouting, "Witch or devil, I challenge you to a fight! I'll try cold steel upon your pate!" With a single blow, he killed the old priest. The Normans let out a victorious shout that echoed through the woods, and the Vikings began to falter. The tide of battle had turned, and a decisive victory was within reach. Now the Normans fiercely attacked their Saxon enemies with overwhelming numbers, cutting down 1/3 of them before they were willing to fight back. The battle was then equally matched, with neither side showing mercy. The ranks of both armies diminished at a horrifying pace until only Bjarni remained to face off against 3 Normans. Despite his opponents being smaller and less well-equipped, they cunningly attacked him from both sides. Bjarni managed to strike back and cut down one of his assailants, but was struck from behind, and then the sinews in his left arm were severed. The battle ended with a final blow from Bjarni's sword, but he was badly wounded and nearly unconscious. If the Norman had fought evasively, he could have won the battle with ease. However, he underestimated Bjarni's remaining strength and was quickly defeated. With a deep groan, Bjarni fell among the corpses and lost consciousness. Chapter 43. The Conqueror Conquered. "Step forth, my son," spoke Homer. "Cast out the shame that comes with youth and embrace the honesty of your trade." Not long after Ragnvald and Elfrida's marriage, Hofsos and his son-in-law journeyed to London. Despite having only maintained a defensive stance and attempting to ease tensions between races, Hofsos was aware that his actions in giving his daughter to a Saxon rebel had angered William and their Norman neighbours. He was also aware that any misstep could escalate into a difficult matter to resolve. Upon reaching London, he found that the king was in Winchester. Hofsos and Ragnvald headed to the castle, and though they went together, Hofsos alone approached the king. It was known that Northumbria and its people were a constant problem for William. He needed reliable information and advice on how to keep the Saxons in check and suppress their occasional outbursts. Thus, Hofsos was welcomed heartily. As luck would have it, Hofsos's archenemy, Odo, was away in Normandy during the audience. Only Fitz-Osborne, who may have had some jealousy towards Hofsos, was present. The Count was then ushered into the audience chamber. Inside, William sat on a throne in front of the entrance, beneath a richly embroidered canopy that hung above his head and with side hangings drooping from the walls. As Hofsos prostrated himself, the king rose from his seat, bade the Count to rise, and shook him by the hand.
"You have served our cause nobly at Hastings, Hofsos, and we shall keep your deeds in mind. But why have you been absent from our court? Have you been preoccupied with chasing off pesky Saxon birds from their nests, making room for yourself to perch? It is an activity that many knights seem to enjoy instead of being present at court. However, I have ordered my scribes to make a book cataloguing the location of all the rich estates. My loyal barons are doing their part, avoiding taxes, while I have yet to receive anything but bruises and small change. Regardless, I shall hear you out. Are you here to request more lands or a royal warrant for thy current holdings, as is typical?" "I beg your pardon, my liege, but it is not lands I seek. I journeyed to the savage Northumbria and secured a rather adequate estate." "It must be magnificent if you call it tolerable. Lush, ample, and bountiful. Continue. I'll note that you did not feel it necessary to request permission from your king." "I implore you, your majesty, to forgive my presumption. My intention is to update you on the state of the land and its potential, and to inform you of an alliance which I have struck with one of the most formidable Saxon chieftains in the north. By my swear, Hofsos, did you dare ally yourself with those Saxon curs? You are far too bold, and you seem to have forgotten about the farmer who tended to a serpent that subsequently bit him. Be warned, Hofsos, of my power and authority." "Please hear me out, your majesty," replied Hofsos, flustered by William's irritation. "I have brought this Saxon chieftain to court, and with your permission he will pledge fealty to you. His influence is unmatched among all the Saxon lords north of the Humber." Yes. They make oaths of loyalty easily enough like the rest of them, and just as honestly too. Indeed, de Montfort matches your courage by coming here after the tumult at Durham. Nonetheless, we will see him. Such bravery is contagious, but he should beware of how he carries himself. He ventures into the lion's jaws, and some of these Saxon farmers are too loud-mouthed, thinking it's fine to challenge me. You say you brought him here?" "Yes, your majesty, he awaits your pleasure." "Very well. Let him be ready. We will call him shortly after we have considered the matter further." Hofsos left the room, and the king grabbed Fitz-Osborne's arm. They paced the room, discussing the Count's behaviour. "Fitz-Osborne, what do you think of Hofsos's actions? I wish our brother Odo, who is in Normandy, were here. He has some grievance against the Count, but I'm not sure what it is. I've heard whispers of disloyalty, but nothing concrete. Do you know anything?" "Well," replied Fitz-Osborne carefully, "there are whispers, as you say, but your majesty should hear him and his Saxon ally. Northumbria is a wild place,
and if he can exert influence there through this Saxon insurrectionist, it may be advantageous to use him. But I would not rely too much on either of them." In truth, Fitz-Osbern was happy to see Hofsos removed from the king's council, as he was jealous of the count's power and feared losing favour with the monarch. "You speak wisely. It's best to hear the whole story, even if it's too bold for my liking. If there's a fox in the hen house, he'll stink, and I trust your nose, Fitz-Osbern, to sniff him out promptly." With that, the king ordered the supplicants to be brought in. William steadfastly held on to Fitz-Osbern's arm, anticipating the arrival of Hofsos and Ragnvald. The two men stood at the entrance, awaiting the king's directive to move forward. However, as soon as William caught sight of Ragnvald, he tightly grasped onto Fitz-Osbern's arm, whispering hoarsely, "Notre Dame! What is this, Fitz-Osbern? Is this Harold resurrected? Did we not find his body at Hastings?" "Do not fret, your majesty. This is a far younger man than Harold, but resembles him fervently," Fitz-Osbern replied. The king examined Ragnvald calmly for a few minutes before resuming his composure. Afterwards, he signalled Hofsos to approach, and the count, along with Ragnvald, walked forward, bowing their knees before the conqueror. De Montfort spoke. "If it pleases your majesty, Ragnvald, a faithful and loyal Saxon ealdorman, son of Ealdorman Ulfson, ruler of Northumbria under Saxon governance, is present." "Rise, Hofsos," William stated. He further gestured for them to occupy chairs across from his throne. "Saxon," he addressed Ragnvald, "I hear you are here to pledge fealty to me. Vow in front of myself and my chamberlain to be my unwavering retainer until death." "I am here to do so if it pleases your royal highness," replied Ragnvald. "If you intend to be a hypocrite and rogue, swearing fealty to me, but then almost immediately tempting my subjects to rebel against me, you will have numerous illustrious examples to follow. How long have you been considering this decision? Surely it is a belated remorse. Did you resist me at Hastings?" William sternly questioned. "I did resist your highness at Hastings, I must confess," Ragnvald stated. "And most certainly also at York, if you are brave enough to confess, Saxon," William proclaimed. "I also opposed your highness at York," Ragnvald fearlessly stated. "Tut, tut, you dog!" William exclaimed, furiously clenching the hilt of his sword. "You are indeed an auspicious retainer, de Montfort." Turning to Ragnvald, he added, "You are always present when there is even a slight chance to undermine my authority and kill my people, Saxon dog. Why the eagerness for peace now? I assume that it is due to the grip of Norman hands around your throat."
"I do not fear the Norman, your majesty. If necessary, I am ready to sacrifice myself for my nation. Nevertheless, I have carefully considered the situation and recognized the futility of continuing the resistance. I have persistently advocated for peace in our Witan. If it pleases your majesty to show me mercy, I will prove to be a faithful subject." The straightforward and undaunted comportment of the Saxon leader evidently impressed the king. He scrutinized Ragnvald intently for a minute or two, inspecting him from head to toe, and studying his countenance as if he wanted to discern his innermost thoughts. Then, addressing Hofsos, he said, "Wait outside. We will contemplate on this." No sooner had the two withdrawn than William sprang up from his chair, grabbing Fitz-Osbern's arm. He cried, "By God's splendour! This Saxon is a remarkable fellow, Fitz-Osbern. He's got some spirit in him. A devil as an adversary, I concede, but to be wooed as a friend. Did you notice how he stood up to me like a man? By the Holy Cross. He looked me in the eye without flinching, and there was no trace of that hypocritical whine that I despise above all. Did you also observe how he spoke the truth without hesitation, in a way that pleased God and dared the devil? If he genuinely favours us, we'll do everything in our power to appease him. What do you think, Fitz-Osbern? He seems like a man who can lend a hand if he wants to. Even so, I admit, there is something independent about him that would be better if it were extinguished. He appears to be someone who could cause trouble. But I'd like to ask Hofsos more questions about this alliance he mentioned. We need more information." "Thank you, Fitz-Osbern. I completely forgot about this alliance. Summon Hofsos alone," he said, addressing a servant. When the count returned, the king inquired, "What is this alliance that you have formed with this Saxon, Hofsos?" "I initially forced him out of his castle, your majesty,
but he erected a fortress on one of our mountains, which the troops I had at my disposal were utterly unable to dislodge. It is a rugged and hilly area, Your Majesty.
You should have sought my aid instead of allowing vermin to thrive before you. I beg for Your Majesty's forgiveness, but if you recall, during your last visit to York, I expressed the situation of this Saxon and his followers. But you didn't ask for help. I remember clearly that you spoke of his peaceful nature and how he could be safely left alone. I believe Your Majesty may have misunderstood the essence of my message. Nonetheless, we established friendly relations. He visited me at the castle with an offer of peace that he has upheld loyally. Presently, he's in a deadly feud with the other Saxon chieftain Bjarni, because he declined to join their organized insurrection. Further, in a secret meeting of the Saxon Witan, which was convened by Ethelreda, he courageously advocated for peace. Stop there. You claimed that Ethelreda assembled the Saxon Witan. My reports state that the prince informed my troops about the traitorous gathering and proclaimed his loyalty. He's now in Rouen under my protection. It's true, Your Majesty, he did, but only after Ragnvald accused him of cowardice to his face and claimed that he wasn't fit to rule England. Subsequently, other attendees followed Ragnvald's lead and declared that they wouldn't support such a prince. Then, under the cover of darkness, he fled to a neighbouring Norman camp and provided information. Fitz-Osborne, did you hear that? By God's splendour, we need to know more about this. But no matter, the king said, waving his hand impatiently. Continue. What else is there to say about this alliance that you formed with the Saxons?
We've coexisted harmoniously, encountering minimal trouble with the numerous outlaw bands scouring Sherwood Forest. His authority is acknowledged as far south as Sherwood. If it pleases Your Majesty, I gave him my daughter's hand in marriage.
Thanks, Hofsos. You should be a king yourself with such royal conduct. You're leaving me breathless with your conversation. That lovely Elfrida that we admired so much years ago, you've given her to him?
My only daughter, Elfrida, Your Majesty.
William the Conqueror, King of England, addressed his court with anger and demands. He scolded Hofsos for not consulting him before allowing his daughter to wed a Saxon. Hofsos defended the love match, asserting it would strengthen the king's authority in the north of England. William was not impressed and expressed distrust of his knights, who claimed to strengthen his authority while undermining it. He then turned to Fitz-Osborne, asking for his opinion on Ragnvald, the Saxon husband. Fitz-Osborne suggested that if Ragnvald could be depended upon, it would do good. William agreed, praising Ragnvald's appearance and expressing his preference for him over his own countrymen. He called for Hofsos and Ragnvald to appear before him, and upon their entrance he berated Hofsos for his irregular conduct. However, he eventually condoned it on conditions he would later name. William praised Ragnvald for marrying one of the most accomplished Norman maidens, and upon his taking the oath of fealty, conferred upon him ample lands. He then appointed Hofsos as the Earl of Northumberland, and tasked him and Ragnvald with the welfare of the province. He warned them to be faithful, for if he discovered unfaithfulness, he would root them out of the land. With a wave of his hand, William dismissed them from his presence. Chapter 44. The Last of the Vikings. From the strain of many years serving in the state, now limps an aged man, seeking a final resting place among you. Provide a small plot of land as an act of benevolence. William Shakespeare. On a cold December morning, lay brothers of the Crowland Monastery were foraging for wood when they encountered an unusual sight. The figure they found was a thin and exhausted man, his red hair and beard unkempt, and his face drained of colour. Yet, despite his weakness, his eyes glinted strangely from beneath his shaggy brows. At his side, a starving dog whimpered and licked his emaciated hands. The terrified churls thought this strange being must be a woodland spirit. But the figure beckoned weakly to them and spoke. "Can you guide me to Crowland?" he asked in a frail voice. "You're not far," they replied. "Does Erica, the daughter of Beowulf, live there? Torfrida, the wife of Hereward, and Godiva, the wife of Leofric, reside there, along with a younger one named Erica. She has flaxen hair and is a holy woman given to prayer and fasting. She's very kind to the poor. Is she the one you seek? I've journeyed far to find this Erica, and I am so badly wounded and weak. Would you kindly transport me in your cart? I'm near death."
Moved by the stranger's obvious helplessness, the men agreed to help. They asked him more about his peculiar quest before unloading their cart, gathering grasses and leaves to make him comfortable. From bits and pieces of wood, the kind-hearted peasants fashioned a makeshift mattress to cushion the jarring bumps of their unsophisticated cart. They struggled to hoist the bulky stranger, who, despite his size, was emaciated and feeble. With great effort, they made their way back to the abbey, winding their way through the forest's maze. Once there, they tended to the stranger's needs, administering food and medicine, and tending to his wounds. "Please, good sirs, might I speak with Erica, the daughter of the Saxon thane Beowulf?" pleaded the stranger, expressing his desperate desire. "Be patient, kind stranger," replied Torfrida, who was attending to his needs. "Our fair Erica is out attending to the sick and downtrodden." The stranger lamented. "You cannot know how much I love Erica, for if she were here, my fate might be different." As soon as Erica returned from her errand, she was informed of the wounded stranger's arrival. She hurried to his bedside, overcome by worry and apprehension. It was as she feared. It was Bjarni lying there, weakened and consumed by illness. It was clear that death was looming, eager to claim him for its own. His eyes glowed with an unsettling light, signaling the end was near. Erica sat down next to him, transformed by her religious habit. What a stark difference from her former self! Bjarni groaned deeply at the sight of her. Her once luscious long locks, the pride of her youth, were shorn and hidden under her hood. Her expressive blue eyes and beautiful features were still visible, but her fair skin had paled, hinting at a recent aging, or perhaps the toll of living a cloistered life. Bjarni clasped Erica's hand with his weak and feeble fingers, gazing up at her with deep reverence. To him, this fair Saxon woman was none other than Saint Erica, her image enshrined within his heart. With deep seriousness, he began to question her. "As you can see, Erica, I am well-nigh hunted to death," he said, his voice low and strained. "I am dead beat, and I fear the worst. Will I ever recover?" Erica shook her head, her expression grave. "I'm afraid not in this world, my lord," she said softly. Bjarni groaned in response. "But I cannot be spared now, Erica. The old cause is desperate and in need of me. What will become of my oppressed countrymen with never a leader to look to?" "God alone knows, my lord," Erica replied. "But I trust that through this fiery ordeal and the long struggle, he will bring profit to our nation. Already signs are manifest that William's hatred is abating, and Saxons are being received into favour." "Saxons being received into favour by the tyrant usurper!" Bjarni exclaimed. "Then the renegade Ragnvald and sycophants and time-servers alike will thrive. I curse them all." "Call them not renegade, my lord. Neither curse them," Erica chastised gently. "Ragnvald will best serve his countrymen by accepting what was inevitable in any case." "Nothing was inevitable if he had stood by his country," Bjarni retorted fiercely. "We would have followed him anywhere, for none of us had the head to command as he had, and he wielded a powerful sword. No other man ever got the better of me in single combat, and I could have worshipped him had he stood by us. But the Norman woman bewitched him, and I hate him for saving his cowardly skin and betraying his country because of a dark-eyed siren and temptress." "My lord, no more of this," Erica said sternly. "Ragnvald was the wisest among us, and if you and others had followed his guidance, there would have been less shedding of Saxon blood." "I perceive the hand of a greater power behind this revolution, a force that has deemed it fit to amalgamate the Viking valour and hardiness, along with the Saxons' gentle temperament, the Norman chivalry, and refinement into an eternal melting pot. Our identity, yours and mine, may fade into obscurity, but the best of us shall re-emerge in the times to come." "Your words cloak your intent, Erica. Do you truly believe the Viking spirit will perish?" "Never!" bellowed the man, his voice ringing with passion. "The Vikings who have conquered every sea and land, vanishing without a trace into these feeble people? Nonsense. This will not stand. Fetch my sword, Erica. It shall reinvigorate me." "The sword is at rest, my liege," Erica said calmly. "It has spilled enough blood. Let it rest eternally." "Why have you denied me my sword, Erica? I am still capable of wielding it. Mark my words, Erica. The man grappled with his weakened body, attempting to rise to his feet. "The Viking spirit still burns in us, and we shall dominate the seas once more. I cannot bear this inertia. Take me to Brunswold. I have enough men left for one last battle." "My lord, you shall never hold a sword again. The Norseman's rule, the supremacy of force, is in its death throes. It may linger for centuries amidst obscurity, even through the interminable twilight of the ages, as some blinded souls attempt to revive its fading embers sporadically. Yet the gloomy and odious might of power and violence shall never triumph again in the future of this world. Erika, you embitter my demise. What do you seek, girl? Are our gods deceased? What of our sagas? Consider this. There are Vikings beyond the northern sea, and they shall return. Do you believe these opulent and satisfied Normans can oust them? The audacious warriors from the craggy mountains and fjords of the wild sea are coming." "Listen!" he cried out, half delirious. "Do you hear their shouts? Will you bring me my sword, Erika? I must rise and confront them." Then he slumped back, drained of energy. "Alas, this is the consequence of our recklessness. What am I doing dying in a bed? The sea is where the Vikings belong. Why did we ever settle on land except for the sake of plunder? Cursed luxury has been our undoing. Nevertheless, we shall return to the sea. Wait patiently, Erika. You shall see who will reign supreme. Compose yourself, my lord. Time is fleeting. If you ask me, the gods of the Viking are nothing but fictitious tales, conjured up by savages and barbarians." Bjarni stared at her intently. "Oh, you have converted to Christianity, Erika. You should never have turned your back on our ancient beliefs. You take the strength out of me. You should have stood by the old faith so that we might meet in Valhalla, you and I. You know not how difficult you have made it for me to accept death like a Viking. You stripped me of my weapon as I ford the stream. We shall never come together again in Valhalla, my lord. But perchance we might meet once more in the kingdom of our God." "Not I, Erika. You do not imply that I might gain entry into the Christian's paradise. Consider who I am. Yes, even you have a chance, my lord. I am confident that you can make it in if you choose to. Will you be there, Erika? Through the kindness of our Lord, I hope to be there. But you tell me he is a Prince of Peace. Yes, he is the Prince of Peace. You are aware that I am a Viking. What use will I have for the Christian's heaven? Will I be granted my trusty sword? No, my lord, you will have no use for a sword, since there is no malice, tyranny, or oppression in heaven. Would you consent to being my wife, Erika? There is no marriage in heaven, my lord. May I always be close to you, Erika? If I could, my lord, I would want you near me always. Then I should like to journey to the Christian's paradise, if only I were able to remain close to you. There won't be any Normans there, will there, Erika? Yes, my lord. I hope that even Normans will be there as well. Norseman, Norman, it matters not, Erika. My heart burns with a fire of hate for them all. Our God offers you a new heart. He takes our heart of stone and gives us a heart of flesh, a heart that loves even its enemies. Bjarni's response was a pained groan. Erika, what madness is this? I am a Viking. Should I trade in my armor and sword for silks and feathers and become a flabby courtier? No, I will take Valhalla over such a fate. And what of you, Erika? Will you go with me to the afterlife of the Vikings? But Erika stood firm. My lord, your mind is clouded. Let me send a priest to instruct you. No, no priest. You can instruct me, Erika. Our old priest Olaf is dead, and with him the old heathen ways. The end is near, as you warned. And in our last battle with the Normans, the gods did not fight for us. They let us fall to the enemy's swords, even Olaf, who thought he was charmed. The old heathenism is gone forever. Bjarni called out to Odin in desperation. Come to our aid, Norseman's god. Can you not help us now? But his energy was spent, and he sank back, defeated. The Viking knew in his heart that he needed a new way of thinking, a new way of living. But he also knew that the path ahead would not be easy. Please calm yourself, my lord, or I will have to take my leave, spoke Erika. However, Bjarni did not hear her words, exhausted and closed-eyed. But suddenly he opened his eyes with feverish wakefulness and desperately sought the comforting presence of Erika. I thought you had gone. My end is near, Erika. I will not recover, but I have one request. Bury me near the sea, where I can hear the Vikings' triumphant shouts and feel the impact of their attack. Please, mound lay me and place my sword turfing, foe-hater, under my head. They will know it to be the grave of a Viking chief, and the skalds will sing of my valor. Erika, it is so dark. For a while he lay still, but then he startlingly shouted, Down with the Normans! Men! Take me out of this cave, I cannot breathe! This tumultuous struggle continued for a short time before the final peace prevailed, and the last of the Vikings closed his eyes, with Eirika nearby, keeping her watchful presence.
Chapter 45. Sunshine has its shadows.
Love, for man, is but a mere fragment of existence, while for women it is the entirety of their being, as aptly put by Byron. We shall now bid adieu to these intriguing chronicles. The valiant Bjarni, who had succumbed to many afflictions, met his end clasping the hand of Erika. His mortal remains were interred, as per his wish, in a desolate location by the sea where notorious Viking vessels once anchored. A sword, a symbol of his bravery, was lain beneath his head, and a loyal Erika mourned his burial. They erected a grand mound befitting of a Viking chieftain, and there Bjarni awaits his reawakening, for he had a noble purpose, and pursued it with admirable tenacity and selflessness. His legacy will forever be a part of the history of mankind. Ragnvald's reintegration into king's favour brought a positive impact on the Saxon populace that had to endure the Normans' tyrannical rule. Gradually, our land began to regain its former vigour, lost after the tumultuous conquest era. The overbearing brutes that were the conquerors saw a decline in their lazy ways, and Norman knights slowly acclimated to a peaceful way of life.
Gormr, a strong and determined man, once again took possession of his ancestral lands. He was accompanied by his lovely wife Mireille, and was very happy. Before long his home was filled with his own robust and lively children, who, with their vigour and daring, seemed destined to continue the proud legacy of English freemen that had spanned generations before the arrival of the Normans. There is only one other incident worth mentioning, and it occurred many years after the events aforementioned. On a clear autumn day, some of Ragnvald's children were playing in the woods near the castle. As they chased squirrels and gathered nuts, a woman appeared. She was dressed in religious attire and had a peaceful, welcoming face. Despite initial surprise, the children warmed to her quickly. The woman approached the eldest boy and asked for his name, and when he replied with Ragnvald, she put a beautiful gold crucifix on him and blessed him. She then turned to the other children, learning their names and giving each of them her blessing. As suddenly as she appeared, she vanished into the woods and was never seen again. The children ran home to show their parents the beautiful crucifix the woman had given them. Ragnvald considered the matter for a while, but he couldn't identify the stranger with anyone he knew. Elfrida, his wife, appeared sorrowful and shed a tear. But she did not mention the stranger's character, although she grasped the sorrowful enigma and understood the tragic events that occurred over the years in which an honourable and moral woman's affection was brutally oppressed. The end.
This concludes The Final Voyage, Viking historical fiction, written by Bjorn Wolfe, narrated by R.K. Marks. Visit brooksaudiobooks.com for updates on the availability of new books and a special free offer.